Welcome to De-Stress Your Business, the podcast where we show you how to get incredible results in your business, but without constant stress. I'm Alexis Kingsbury, a serial entrepreneur and founder at AirManual, and I'm joined by my co-founder and co-host, Paddy Mann. Good morning, Paddy.
Good morning.
Good morning. So one of the biggest sources of stress for business leaders is simply time. There's never enough of it. So what if I told you that sorting your processes out could help you free up 15 hours every week? That would sound amazing, right? Imagine what it would mean for you and your team, or what for you and your family. Though perhaps you'll hear that number and disregard it. 15 hours per week sounds nice, but you suspect it'll probably take a lot of work, and maybe you won't even find 15 hours to save. This is normal when it comes to sorting processes. Most leaders greatly underestimate the benefits that it will have for their business and grossly overestimate the effort needed. So today we're going to go deeper on how sorting your processes will help you free up time and how you can start seeing these results really, really quickly. So let's start with an example. Paddy, how has sorting processes in your team helped you free up time?
Well, I would describe it using the phrase, did it come from Michael Gerber's E-Myth? Essentially gives you the superpower to document and delegate. And in turn, that you can use that to delegate the processes, the tasks that you're doing, and elevate what you are doing. So I remember back in, I think it must have been 2017, and I was really struggling with this. I had heard those terms that, you need to document and delegate. You can delegate and elevate. And it sounds lovely, but I wasn't making it work in practice. And it took a kind of a series of kind of epiphany moments where we read through a lot of the best practices, read through some of the great books out there, Traction, E-Myth, and so on, tested some various approaches which didn't work out for us. And of course, this is one of the reasons why a lot of business leaders are skeptical of it being able to work because they've put some time into it before and it didn't land. But we cracked it. We cracked the code. We found a way where we could document the tasks that we were doing at a high level. We would be able to focus on the ones that are causing a lot of pain. And what it meant in practice was I was spending 3 hours doing code reviews for someone I'd hired to be a developer. Mm-hmm. And I would be doing this multiple times a week, and I was busy as hell, so I was doing this in my evening, and I was getting flack from the wife and feeling pretty terrible about it. And I was questioning, and she was questioning why I was doing work which ultimately didn't mean that we were that much better off than me doing it myself. And we were trying to delegate effectively, and I was giving the guidance and felt that I'd given all this kind of context that the developer should be able to use to get good results, but he was making the same mistakes again and again and again. And when we cracked it, when we worked out, okay, wait a minute, if we look at the specific pain points and document it in a way which means it's easy for him to the person that we're delegating to refer to, so that they can do the tasks which are causing pain, and they can spot the things that normally tripping them up and avoid it, then we can solve this. And we are literally put in this kind of review checklist where firstly I would be able to review and do it consistently. So there wasn't sometimes I would pick up 3 points but forget the fourth, and the next time it would be different. So I started doing it consistently, and then I handed it over to the developer to do it himself. And almost overnight I went down from 3 hours doing code reviews to 30 minutes. And it wasn't long after that we hired another developer, and that 30 minutes went down to 0. But of course I didn't stop there. So in that 2.5 hours of saving, that was per code review. I was often doing 2 or 3 of those per week. So that was talking like 5 to 7.5 hours. And of course, I then start looking laterally, and I go, where else can I do this? And I picked out the other tasks that were taking a lot of time, and it was things like doing some of the tech support and responding to customers and dealing with a lot of common queries. Then it was some of the other development tasks, and I realized the developer could be involved sooner in the process, getting more of the planning, and then he could be involved later in the process, supporting the UAT. Then I looked at management tasks, and then eventually I pulled myself out completely out of this team And what happens next? Well, firstly, I give some of my evenings back to my wife. Very, very important. But then, what do? I look at the next teams and other things that I can put my time into where I think there's going to be more value. And often it's kind of strategic priorities, or it's other teams that need more support. As a business owner, that's where I'll be going next. And so I'd go into the next team and work out what needed to be done, and then I get to repeat that. So that first exercise, I saved myself 2.5 hours. I then scale it up. So actually, I'm saving 2.5 hours per code review, so more like 5 to 8 hours per week. I then scale it up in that one role, almost doubling or tripling the amount of time saved. I then pull myself out and go into a different area, having already reduced some of that stress by, not working into my evenings. And initially my time has been really well spent there, but then I get used to those tasks, and again I get this opportunity to scale up, bring more people in, and I can repeat the exercise. So yeah, for me personally, this has been something which has freed up a lot of time and has done it again and again and again, and I know that's the same for you too.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and it's funny because it's an area that now I think others, and by which I mean sort of clients, people I meet, employees that work for us, and so on, think of us and think of me as someone who's really good at delegation and handing tasks over and all the sorts of things that we're talking about right now. But it's funny because I think back to a time when I was sat in I remember being in this mastermind meeting with other business owners, and I remember sharing that, you know what, I'm a control freak. I really struggle to delegate, and I think it's been holding back my businesses for 10 plus years, including ones that I was trying to start while at university and so on, because I always struggled to hand over tasks to other people, and right from admin tasks through to sales stuff and business management, like every aspect, I was always the one doing all of it. And whenever I tried to hand it over to other people, it always seemed to bite me again. Exactly as you say, you end up spending more time managing and training and fixing than you did when you were just doing the job. And so I'd always end up taking the job back over. And I remember literally thinking back, like in the run up to that mastermind meeting, and partly in it, thinking maybe the issue is just I'm really good and productive at stuff, and that's particularly back then that wasn't not true. I was, and particularly give me a spreadsheet and I'd be one of the fastest people you see with it. And so my reluctance was, I know that I'm really fast at this. Maybe it is just faster if I do it. And so I was stuck in this cycle of thinking, well, I'm fast at it. I've tried to hand it over to other people. That's not worked. That was a waste of time. I could have just done it. Why don't I just keep doing it? And so I ended up back in that cycle. And it wasn't really until, like as you say, we started changing our approach. And rather than trying to be a great manager with amazing people skills that could just magically delegate, because I remember I was looking up to other business owners who seemed to be more like, they came across to me more like football managers. In fact, one of them was, where they were fantastic at just telling other people what needed to be done and, repeating that message and so on. And somehow that worked successfully, and they never got stuck in the day-to-day. But I never seemed to achieve it. And it wasn't until we sort of changed our approach to what we were doing, and we'll talk about how we do that, that completely changed it for me. And as a result, allowed me to initially step out of some admin and then sales and all aspects of the business, to the point that now, one of our businesses, neither of us are required day to day at all. And so we've been able to kind of delegate all of that. But I think one of the concerns that a lot of people have is this going to take a long time? When I talk to even customers of ours in the early days, where they're invested in, okay, yes, I definitely want to sort out my processes, I want to document them, get them all sorted in them, and do all of this sort of thing, and then they'll say something along the lines of, perhaps we just need to spend a few weeks or months, focus entirely on get everything documented, and then we'll start to see the results. Or and then typically that'll be followed with, but now's a busy time, so let's put it off for the future. So let's dispel that myth. How quickly can we expect to get results when approaching this properly?
Well, yeah, the time it takes definitely depends on how you approach it, and yeah, this myth is unfortunately it's a reality when people do approach it in the wrong way, in the old school way. Yeah, I'll say it's the wrong way now. So the kind of the traditional way to think about process is, you're putting these systems in your company, in your team. You're working out how to get everything working really beautifully, and so you're looking at getting all the different processes fully documented and getting all of your team completely compliant with them. And the problem here is that you're basically setting yourself this goal of getting 100% everything documented, 100% of the steps, 100% compliance, and you're doing something which you wouldn't do in other areas, which is you're saying that every process has equal importance and will solve the same amount of business pain. And I say it like that, and you go, well, that's clearly nonsense. If I look at my team at my company, I can see where the pain points. I can see. And if you think about it, you can go, I can see those specific processes which are causing people to trip up. And it's like, I've had to deal with 5 customer complaints this week because they were oversold something that was sold to them on the initial sales call. It's like, well, brilliant. You've got a real business pain. There's a specific process there, and it might be the initial sales call, it might be the follow-up, but you can identify a specific pain point and solve that. And so that was one of the kind of the big kind of transformations we had, is just go, let's stop going across the whole organization, trying to identify all of them, which is sadly, one, the standard that's kind of expected by most people in the head. 2, what happens in a lot of enterprises. And 3, actually, it's what's still getting recommended in some books, which is a travesty. And instead, let's just focus on specific pains. That's what I did with the code reviews. I stopped trying to document the entire development team. I stopped trying to document the whole business. I focused on that one team. And then what I did is the second step is the bit that needs a little more support and guidance, because it's basically, it took me trial and error. So we tried it in different ways. We tried, not using documentation, using too much documentation and so on. And it took a while until we worked out, okay, there's a recipe here. There's a way that we can approach this documentation to get the same results every time, so that we've got something that we can delegate. So the easy bit is going, where's the pain point? And then there's this step of learning how to document. And so for us, I would say that journey, honestly, you could stretch it to say that it took anywhere between 6 months and 15 years, depending on where you want to start the journey. But it took some trial and error. Now, we've learned those lessons. And so now when we're working with businesses, we're applying them in. And it's simple things like how you, literally the title of your documentation. So if you call a document send an invoice, it's really clear what it's for. If you call it invoice management, it's not. So many little things like that. Really, really simple, really easy to train you when you know what they are. But you'll make these mistakes the first time round. And so when we work with customers now, we're able to give that guidance. We using our AirManual tool, we're kind of building a lot of the guidance in, so it's actually much easier to do that. And what do we expect? So what the goal that we're setting is that you should always be seeing a positive return on the time that you invest within weeks. And when we're actually working hands-on with you, we will guarantee that every time. 1, because we'll make you raise a focus on the initial problem, and 2, we'll show you the simple steps to get there. And sometimes it takes us weeks, and sometimes and no, you had a great example where you literally did it on the call. That was the business owner of the printing company, right?
Yeah, so there are 2 that come to a couple specifically that come to mind when you talk about that, about how you can get really speedy return on investment. So one was a business owner of a printing business, which exactly as you say, we got an amazing speed of return on the results, because when we first started talking to him, he was working 7 days a week, 60 hours a week. Couldn't even see how to free up time or even make time to free up time. In fact, it was 50-50 whether he turned up to the call with me, frankly. And so, but he was like, oh no, I know I've missed the last two, I'm really sorry. But so I was keen to come on, but I'm really busy, so maybe we should reschedule. And fortunately, I got him to stay long enough that we'd talk a bit about where he was spending his time. And we identified there were a number of processes that he was spending his time on, and one was sending quotes to customers. So customers would ask for a quote for a printing project, and they would send a quote back. And because he'd changed the product lines and so on, previously I think it had been done by salespeople and so on, but now it was complex, and as a result they were all coming to him. And it meant that he calculated that he was currently spending 3 hours per day responding to quotes. So that's 15 hours per week on one process of sending quotes to customers. And he said, I know I need to document it and delegate it, but I just haven't found the time. I figure it'll probably take me about 8 hours, but I just don't know where to find 8 hours on my schedule. So I said, well, we've got 45 minutes left of the call. Let's see what we can do. And in under 30 minutes, we documented the entire process end to end. So we got title, the context, we put in the high level steps, we then added detail where needed to explain the tricky logic or calculations, etc. And then as part of that same call, scheduled a session with his account managers where we would then hand that over. And so on the one subsequent call, got that handed over to the account managers. They walked through it, asked questions. We tweaked the process based on their questions. And as a result, after that point, they were able to do it. And that instantly saved that business owner 15 hours per week because he was able to delegate something to the team. But the other thing that was really nice is that not only did he save all that time, but I said to him, what was the most valuable thing? Presumably it was the time saved. He said, actually, it was the fact that previously it was taking him 3 days to get back to a customer who wanted a quote, and now his account managers do it in under an hour. And you just imagine what that does for your conversion rate, which is absolutely insane. But 15 hours per week from one task, one process that was handed over to his team is absolutely incredible. And in fact, recently with one of our existing customers at Right Business Results, Georgia, we were having a check-in call with her. And checking in like how things are going, and the onboarding's been fantastic, and these processes are great, and but she said, I'm finding that I'm kind of getting busy again, and so we quickly just ran through well, where are you spending your time at the moment, and identified a few things that needed to be delegated and handed over, and it was like that mind shift to just go, yes, I need to just apply what I know works and hand it over. And so I think it was a 45-minute call, maybe 50-minute call, we managed to free up, and she sent me a WhatsApp message. I think it was she calculated it as a day to a day and a half per week as a result of that one call, and just hand over. And so and the return, so the speed of results that you can get, literally you're getting a return on investment on that time within hours or a day or a few days. It's absolutely incredible when you can kind of get that speed of return. And we've used a few examples there, but what's the typical amount of time we would expect to free up? Because we've thrown a few numbers out there. How do you see it working in terms of the actual numbers and return that you can get?
Cool. So yeah, the number that we keep throwing about is 15 hours, and I can speak to the audience and say it took me a little while before Alexis convinced me that we were right to say 15 hours every time, because it just sounds bonkers. It sounds like, wait a minute, we're not talking. Okay, some business leaders are working beyond the 40 hours, but even within a 40-hour week, we're going to go, it's a big chunk of your week. Surely freeing up that kind of time isn't possible for everyone. Surely that's the edge cases where you've got this person who's doing 3 hours a day on sending quotes or whatever. And we just looked at a load of examples of where it's done in practice. We just saw again and again and again. Yeah, you tallied it up and went, yeah, that's 15 hours. Yeah, that person saved 15 hours. Yeah, this business saved 15 hours. And it's different, right? So for this one business, he saved 15 hours on one call, though, to be fair, when we say 15 hours for that business, that's just where he started. And there's going to be more opportunities to go beyond that 15 hours. because his processes were so in such an opportune place to start documenting and delegating. He's going to get a load more than that. For Georgia Kirk, who you just mentioned, she's now going through that loop for the second or third time. The first time, the big thing taking up all her time was onboarding. And I remember it was something like she had a number of new joiners coming in and would spend upwards of 200 hours with them over their first few months and saved it for every employee. So it was a slightly different structure, but it added up to just an epic amount of time. For myself, I shared how I initially started with a task which saved something like 5 hours a week, which is still quite a lot. And then added to that, and certainly found 15 hours with a quick check. And when we sit down with a business leader and basically just go through the week, it's pretty consistent. We can find well over a day, normally about 15 hours, and often quite a bit more, where we can start saving that. Honestly, I could go through another 5 or 6 stories from the last few weeks. I tell you what, when I'll chuck in, I love this. We spoke to a CTO last week, and he's head of IT who reports into them. He's responsible for doing a number of tasks. One of them is setting up email accounts from time to time. The head of IT goes on holiday, and suddenly you've got this task which takes him 10 minutes to set up email accounts, and it's kind of hanging there. It's essential. Other people can't work if this doesn't happen. And it hasn't been documented and delegated. This is something that could have gone to any junior team member of the team to cover that IT manager, but it's not. And so it goes up to the CTO, and this is, in a 100-person company, his time is valuable. And something which should have taken 10 minutes for a junior resource is suddenly taking him multiple hours because he hasn't done this in ages. And he has to do all the research to work out how it's meant to work, and he's still not confident that it's working. So just there, that's a couple of hours, and that's even without thinking about the wider pain. And ultimately, I know that the head of IT was still disturbed on his holiday because of the lack of documentation there. So we are now happy, confident of saying 15 hours, and we mean it, and we consistently find it for the customers that we work with. It comes in different forms, but if you work through it and basically work through your diary, and actually I just did the same exercise with Alexis here for the I don't know how many time, then you spot where those tasks are and the opportunity to delegate them down.
Yeah, I love that. And it's funny, as you say, when we started off saying, actually, is it 8? We'll say 8 hours. I think, that felt like a sensible thing. Then we said, well, actually, generally we're getting, business owners are getting 15 hours a week back after, as I say, like a few hours in some cases. So we got comfortable with that. And I was thinking about it when I was running a workshop for some business owners. And I suddenly thought, it's sort of technically, in terms of what you can free up, what's possible to free up, is sort of infinite time. And which is a funny concept, because you can say, well, that can't be possible. Like, it's the one meme about, one of those memes about time is that we've all got the same amount, and, we've all got 24 hours and da-da-da. But actually, if you think about it, like let's say that as a business owner, 2 days of my week is spent doing, let's say, financial admin. I'm sending invoices, chasing invoices. So I can free up that 2 days by documenting it and delegating it to a finance administrator. And then let's take that same 2 days. I don't now just sit doing nothing, and we'll talk in a second about how you use that time. But there are, like one use of that time would be, say, going out and doing more sales. So more networking and going and selling. And so now I fill up that 2 days with sales, higher value activity. And then I go, okay, now I can delegate this to a salesperson. So now I hire a salesperson, or maybe I've got an existing one or whatever, and I can delegate it to them. So I've now saved another 2 days. But now I have 2 days available. And so now I might say, well, now the thing that's holding back my sales team is marketing. So I'm now going to go spend some time doing some marketing, coming up with some partnerships and channels. And then I've got that, and that's all working, in which case I then delegate that or whatever, and I've freed up 2 days again. And quite quickly, in that just series of examples, I've freed up 6 days out of a 5-day working week. And of course, this is the reality of what, when we look up to the likes of Richard Branson and Bezos and Musk and whatever, and we say, like, how would they, if they had my business, how would they run it? And the truth is they wouldn't do like 99.9% of the tasks that we all do. And that's because essentially of what we're talking about is they're freeing up their time out of those things. They're not taking on those tasks at all. And so essentially sort of freeing themselves infinitely from the kinds of tasks that you've got in the business. And so I think that's the game, right? It's about repeating it over and over. So I've kind of alluded to a few examples there, but how do we use the time that gets freed up, and have you used that time that gets freed up each time we kind of repeat these cycles?
Cool. I'll share a couple of more obvious ones, and then one which is actually a little bit less easy to see. So one obvious one that we've talked about a lot is you can use that time for other work activities. And I think what a common thing with business leaders is they say they haven't got enough time, and it's not. They have a clear view of other places where they could be spending their time and deliver more value, and that could be on the big strategic initiatives. And for many leaders, it's just getting any time to think about strategy and come out of the day to day and actually think, am I even going in the right direction? So freeing up time for that. If you've got that strategy time, then it's actually then putting the strategy into practice. So working out where the next projects are, which might be in the current team, it might be working for other teams, all sorts of places where you could be better using your time within your work, and quite often spending it in a much more enjoyable way than on the tasks that could have been delegated. A second way is, of course, to simply work less. So as I mentioned, I was working in the evenings, and I did not want to be working in the evenings on certainly not doing code reviews. Personally, one of our values, one of our business values is enjoy the journey. And I don't believe that means every single day clocking off, because sometimes I've got really fun things that I want to get over the line or whatever. But doing code reviews in the evening is certainly not part of enjoying the journey. So I wanted to get rid of that and actually better defend the time that I was having with my family. So two things there: work on more important and better, more enjoyable stuff. Secondly, work less, reclaim your time, and hopefully put a fence around it to stop that kind of abuse from reoccurring. And both of those are big. The podcast here we've got de-stress your business. Both of those are massive de-stressors. Having it not affect your family life is huge, but feeling like you are spending stuff on the most important stuff. Like you're spending time on the most important stuff in your business, and that you're doing stuff that you enjoy. That's huge for people's sense of fulfillment and drive. It's epic. It's really, really valuable. I'll share one more, and you may have some to add to this, but one of the ones which is kind of hidden is the time that you spend with your direct reports and the people that are supporting you. Because until this moment, essentially you're having to be in the weeds doing all this stuff because they're struggling to take on tasks which you had hired them to do and hoped that they could do. And so the result is that they're struggling with that. You're spending the time with them trying to fix mistakes and provide kind of these micro level interactions and trying to solve it, and feeling a bit like you're banging your head against a wall. And they're feeling it, and they're feeling potentially a bit like they're being micromanaged. And when you've got that kind of issue, you can't think about bigger challenges, bigger growth opportunities, because you're focused on that pain point. When that pain point goes away, the time that you get with your direct reports changes. So whereas I was previously just kind of going, we got to fix this one issue, it's killing us, it's killing me. Instead, I'm starting to go, how can we help you? How can we grow? Where do you want to go next? Do you want to help in grow further as an engineer? Do you want to get involved in data security? There are other ways you could help me. And so the time that I was getting my direct report was transformed. And this was one of the big moments where I kind of changed from it would be extreme. I wouldn't say I was a micromanager, but it has some of those things which people associate with that. And change. Anyone watching the video will know Alexis is questioning my claim.
I'd have said you were a light micromanager. You're not now. we both. To be clear, we both were.
All right. I'll take that. So yeah, essentially, I was a micromanager. Certainly, that's maybe how the team was describing me, and apparently, it's definitely how Alexis would have described me. And that changed. This gave me the ability to turn into a coach, because the problems that I was facing with this direct report had been transformed, and because I had that time, that space to support them in that way. So it was another kind of revelation of how I was able to use my time.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think, as you say, there's so many different ways in which you can use that time effectively. And yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to one of our customers, Adam at Convertico, where he was saying that one of the challenges that he had was that he was almost nervous about how he would then use the time that he freed up. He's sort of aware of that principle of Parkinson's law, which is that work will always expand to fill the time available. And so it was interesting that for him, it was, I was talking to him about quite early in the journey. After I think it was 2 1-hour calls, he was already saving 2 hours per week from one particular area, and saved 7.5 hours the following week on because he of some other changes around onboarding. But his biggest concern when he even embarked on that, he said that I was nervous about, like, what am I going to spend that time on? And so I said, well, where do you want to be spending the time? And so, well, one of the things that I'm not doing enough of is personal development. I want to be learning and making myself a better business owner. And so it was interesting that for him, one of the things that he needed to do was block out that time so that it didn't get re-eaten up, and make sure that he was blocking out that time for personal development, whether it's attending training or blocking out time for reading or whatever it is, arranging coaching sessions. But for some people, myself included in the past, it's been about blocking out time for spending time with family, blocking out your evenings so that you don't end up with any calls after 5:30 p.m, making sure that, your weekends are protected and that you don't kind of assume, maybe I can do some work at the weekend just to catch up and so on. And instead working on the basis, no, that's blocked out family time. And I think that's one of the big shifts that people have to make is making sure that they're really clear about where they're going to spend the time instead, and making sure that happens. But you do have to. It's this catch-22. You've got to free up the time and then get some, and it's an iterative process, essentially, of finding better ways of spending your time on what matters most, whether it's for your business or for you personally, or for your family, or having a bigger impact on the world. Fantastic. Well, we've covered a lot in this session, talking about one of the key benefits of sorting out your processes, which is freeing up your time. We've talked about how it's possible to free up 15 hours a week or more. And as regular listeners will know, we run a weekly webinar that majors on this topic and exactly how to do it. We've alluded a few times to the approach that we found and discovered, developed for doing this, and have used it with many clients and ourselves and other business leaders on how to free up 15 hours per week and remove the constant stress of running a business without slowing down growth. And so we go deep exactly into how to do that. It's typically every Wednesday at 1 p.m. UK time, but you can find out more and register for the next one at www.airmanual.co/webinar. And a final note for our podcast listeners: as a new podcast, we need your help. If you found the content today valuable, please just take 1 minute to leave an honest review. This will help the podcast get more visibility and help more people. And if you're on social media listening to this right now, please do reshare it, like it, subscribe, comment, etc. It'll help us enormously, and we really, really appreciate you for it. Otherwise, until next time, have fun.